Hey there, friends. It's Mrs. Bailey, and today we are going to be learning about Helen Keller. And right here on the front of this book, it says Spirit of Courage. This word right here, courage, that means brave. And if you already know who Helen Keller is, you already know that she's pretty brave. But if you don't, you're going to find out why. She was definitely a courageous woman, and we're going to just head right into the book. I'm going to put my cursor down just like I did every now and then, so if you're lost, you can catch right back up. I really encourage you to follow along. It says, Helen Keller was an American author and lecturer who is best known for her life as a deaf-blind person who overcame the struggles life threw at her by learning how to communicate with people. This word right here, lecturer, that means she's someone who went around teaching others and speaking to other people about the deaf-blind community. Not only did she very effectively learn how to communicate with people, but she put her skills to good use by traveling the world, giving hope to others in her same situation. She was known worldwide as an advocate for the blind, as well as a supporter for equal rights for everyone. This word right here, advocate, is also like a supporter. She's someone who fought for the rights of the blind. Born a happy and healthy baby on June 27, 1880, in Tuscumbia, Alabama, Helen Keller was the oldest daughter of Arthur and Kate Keller. So Alabama is right here. It's in the southern United States. Helen was a very advanced toddler. That means she was pretty smart. Able to talk and walk by the age of 1. Unfortunately, at only 19 months, Helen came down with a terrible fever which left her deaf and blind. Doctors are unsure of the exact cause for her illness, but they now think it was either scarlet fever or meningitis. So she became deaf and blind at only 19 months. That is younger than 2 years old because there's 12 months in a year, and 2 years would be 24 months. So before she was even 2. And I'm sure that you already know what these two words mean, but blind means unable to see. Deaf means unable to hear. Those are two really big senses. We have 5 senses, remember? Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling. But those two, sight and hearing, those are two really big senses that help us communicate with other people, that help us be able to talk with other people in one way or the other. After this life-altering event, that means something that changed her life, and with Helen unable to communicate, her behavior became very unruly and wild. She was unable to express herself, so instead she would just react to situations. If she was angry, she'd yell and scream, and if she was happy, for example, if she was being tickled, she would laugh uncontrollably. She would have daily temper tantrums. James, her older half-brother, would try to make her behave, but was unsuccessful. Some family members thought she should be put in a hospital to live, as there seemed to be no hope for a child such as Helen. So before you go and you start thinking, she was having temper tantrums every day, what a mean little bratty child, don't think that, because you have to put yourself in her position. She was unable to communicate in any way because she couldn't see and she couldn't hear. If you're blind, at least you can hear everything. You can hear the sirens to know if you're in trouble. You can hear voices of the people you love. They can talk to you. You can hear music. You can hear TV shows. You can hear the birds singing. You can hear anything. So you're still able to communicate and to have friends in general. If you are deaf, at least you can see. You can see your parents or your grandparents or your teacher. You can see the sirens to know that you're in danger. You can see animals. You can see nature. You can see where to walk. Imagine if you have neither of those two senses and you can't hear nor can you see. You're just living in darkness. You can't even hear your own voice to be able to talk. That has to be a very lonely world. So the only thing that you can do is when you're unhappy, you can scream. You can be upset. You can shout. And you can't even hear yourself doing those things. So try to empathize or put yourself in her shoes when you hear that she had temper tantrums every day. It would be a very lonely place to live. Helen's parents wouldn't give up on her. They were constantly trying to find someone who might be able to help her. Finally, they were able to contact Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone. At the time, Bell was working on a hearing device for the deaf. He was able to direct them to the Perkins Institute for the Blind, where they were introduced to Anne Sullivan, a star student at the school. Anne, too, had been blind, but after several operations, eventually regained her sight. So, some of you might know her name is Annie, if you already know this story. She could be called Anne or Annie. But Anne, at least, if she became her teacher, was able to empathize or to put herself in Helen's shoes a little bit because Anne, too, had been blind before. So she knew what it was like to have one of your communication ways cut off for you. After graduating at only 20 years old, Anne traveled to Alabama where she was able to build a connection with Helen and eventually help her communicate through sign language and to read Braille. The sign language that Anne used with Helen was finger spelling in her hand. It wasn't an easy transition, though, as Helen was very mean to Anne in the beginning. She would pinch, kick, and hit Anne, even knocking out one of Anne's front teeth. Thankfully, much like Helen, Anne was very strong-willed, so she persevered until the breakthrough day when Helen spelled water, W-A-T-E-R, in sign language in Anne's hand after she pumped it into Helen's hand. Anne had done this with Helen several times before, but on this day it just seemed to click with Helen. So, yeah, I can imagine if Anne first came on and took this job with Helen not even understanding who this person was or why she was trying to do things in her hand. So I can understand her just reacting to the situation and being angry, upset, mean, and even knocking out one of her teeth. Now, that's kind of bad, but you know what? She couldn't communicate, and she didn't know who this woman was. But eventually she realized that Anne was there to help her. And the sign language over here, right here, sign language is when you use your hands and you can use it and you move them, and they represent words. So you can do thank you, you can do you're welcome, you can talk about different things by using your hands. But remember, Helen can't see, so she couldn't see just normal American Sign Language. So instead, Anne had to use finger spelling with Helen. So sign language has an alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. So what Anne would do was she would hold out Helen's hand and she would spell out words in Helen's hand and press her hand onto Helen's hand and spell them out at the same time. So she would do the letter W-A-T-E-R in Helen's hand and run it under running water at the same time until eventually Helen realized, oh, she's telling me that this is water, and this is how water is represented. So that was her breakthrough moment when it just clicked with Helen. Finally, she was able to communicate. Helen could read lips by putting her hands on the person's lips in order to feel the way they moved positions. I tried that. Try putting your hand on your own lips and speaking. That's kind of hard. I mean, you can hear yourself, so you know what you're saying, but if you were just going by feel and touch, it would be a little bit difficult. Braille. That's a system of raised dots that can be read with fingers by people who are blind or have low vision. So all of this right here, that's Braille. Those are words. Pretend this book is Charlotte's Web. That person with their fingers can read it the same way we can with our eyes. So she was finally able to read and communicate. This was a game changer for Helen. She was finally able to communicate with someone, and it opened up a whole new world for her. Anne wanted Helen's progress to continue, so she suggested that she go to the Perkins School for the Blind. Helen's parents agreed to let her go. Remember, that's the same school that Anne went to. Once there, Helen continued to do really well. She was even able to learn Braille on a specially made typewriter. She quickly became a public symbol for the school. So she learned to use Braille on a specially made typewriter. That means she could finally write in Braille as well. So she could communicate to others rather than just her reading it, she could write it. At 14, Helen and Anne went to New York for 2 years, where Helen was able to focus on improving her speaking ability. Because remember, she can't hear, so she can't hear her voice when she speaks. Plus, she went deaf before she was even 2 years old. So how many words did she actually know before she was 2 years old? At 19, Helen started Radcliffe College, where she was the first deaf-blind person to receive a Bachelor of Arts degree. While attending Radcliffe, Helen was able to write 2 books, the first being The Story of My Life, published in 1903, and her next book, Optimism, was published the same year. Okay, that's a hard feat. When you're in school to write 2 books at the same time, I don't know. Some people find it hard to read 2 books while going to college. After graduating, Helen continued writing books and articles, bringing attention to the deaf-blind community. But while doing so, she was also fighting for the rights of all, as she saw everyone as equal, regardless of race or gender. Race, that's the color of their skin. Gender, that's whether you're man or woman. She wanted equal pay in the workplace as well as voting rights for women. So at the time, women couldn't even vote. So after graduating college, she didn't stop. She continued to do stuff. She was fighting for the rights of women and of different races. So she never stopped. She was always working, it seemed. In 1924, Helen joined the American Federation for the Blind, AFB. This provided her a way to speak to the world about people with vision loss. She traveled all over giving hope to those feeling hopeless. She visited soldiers who were wounded in war and lost their sight. She was also able to get funding to them to help them get back to as normal a life as possible. So she went all over the world trying to help people. And a lot of times when you're in war, things can happen and you can lose your vision. So she specifically went to hospitals and spoke to people who had lost their vision. She was trying to give them a little bit of hope, to let them know that life wasn't going to always be sad. Helen Keller spent most of her life fighting. First, she fought to overcome her inability to communicate and have a good life. Then she fought for the welfare of others. She fought for how good their lives were. She fought for them to have a good life. She was able to show people that anyone can do anything they set their mind to. It just takes hard work and commitment. And this picture right here, well, it's not really a picture, it's a wax figure. I just want you to realize this isn't an actual picture of her. It's a wax figure of her at Madame Tussauds. It's in a museum. So this is what she looked like when she was a little bit older. This statue of Helen Keller was given to the National Statuary Hall Collection of Alabama in 2009. So that's a more recent occurrence, not too very long ago. and you can find that in Alabama. This right here is a coin. It's a quarter. You may recognize that. And it says Helen Keller is featured on the 2003 Alabama State Quarter, along with her name in Braille. So here is her regular name in English, printed, Helen Keller. Right above it, if you can see this, you have those raised dots, and that's her name in Braille. And right here, it says Spirit of Courage. That's the title of our book. And she is definitely the spirit of courage. Friends, I hope you enjoyed learning about Helen Keller with me today. And go out and do something courageous. Be brave. Even if you're afraid to do something, take the risk and do it. I bet you'll feel like $1,000,000 afterwards. Until next time, I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.